Well, welcome to Newstead Art Gallery here at beautiful Bondi Beach on the land of the Gadigal people to whom we pay our respects. I'm Adrian Newstead, and for the past year I've been delighted to work with Indigenous Curator John Mundine on a retrospective exhibition of artworks by the father of urban Aboriginal art, Gordon Syron, who's with us today. Gordon began painting more than 60 years ago whilst a prisoner in Long Bay Jail. Today I'm privileged to be joined by the prominent Australian and international jurist and academic, the Honourable Michael Kirby.
Thank you, Adrian.
Our former Justice of the High Court of Australia, and Philip Ruddock, who amongst his many roles over a lifetime of service acted as Australia's Federal Attorney General and Minister for Immigration and Multicultural and Indigenous Affairs. As we sit here in front of Gordon Syron's 1978 painting Judgement by His Peers, which has recently been acquired by the National Gallery of Australia, I'll be asking him some questions which were framed by the prominent and celebrated Gamilaroi legal academic, writer, filmmaker and Indigenous rights advocate, Professor Larissa Behrendt, who is currently overseas. We're talking about bringing this together. Do you think, Michael, that the reconciliation movement has had a great effect in Australia, or has it sort of reached a bit of an impasse?
No, it hasn't reached an impasse. It's reached a pause following the defeat of the referendum on the voice, but it cannot reach an impasse because it remains in our history books, in our law, in our practice, and in a lot of instruction in our universities, a lot of research, and in the media. It's much more visible than it was, say, when Philip and I were growing up, and it's still very much alive. But what we've got to do is to address with urgency and priority many of the urgent issues. And I think one of the problems with the voice was that it was rather general and not specific, whereas here it's very specific because it's getting down to a very specific figure of imprisonment rates of non-Indigenous and First Nations people, and it's pointing to the need for redressing this problem and finding ways that we can put into our laws a means to arm the person who's up on the bench in the courts At the moment, it is permissible for a judge to take into account the high imprisonment rates of First Nations people and to take that into account in approaching whether or not to impose a sentence on them of imprisonment, and thereby adding to and reinforcing and replicating what we've been doing for so long, since 1788 effectively. So that the examples are there, the instruction is there. At the moment it's permissible, but this report says we should make it mandatory, we should make it obligatory for the judge to say, okay, we've heard the evidence, you have been convicted of a crime against the society laid down by the Democratic Parliament or the courts, but before I send you to jail, I am told by Parliament that I have to consider the fact that you are a First Nations people, that there are too many of your brothers and sisters in our prisons, and this is a reason for me to look for other ways of dealing with the crime and to deal with you as a person and as a First Nations person. Otherwise, we just keep bundling a lot of the problems into our prisons and reinforcing and repeating the very high levels that make First Nations people in Australia, I think, the most imprisoned community in the whole world. It's a shocker. It's not something we can be proud of, and it's something we have to face up to and make a really genuine effort. And I don't think that's disappeared. That's still part of our obligation.
You've spoken to the legal profession. I mean,
we spoke to Parliament.
Yes,
this is speaking to Parliament, representing everybody.
Right. So we have actually our institutions fall into the categories of legal, parliamentary, and cultural institutions. And I'm wondering, each of those institutions has a role in shaping what is remembered and what is forgotten. And is truth-telling something our current system can accommodate, or does it resist it? And what do these institutions, kind of in the way they work, resist truth-telling?
Well, there is resistance. Of course there's resistance. Resistance is really based on a fear and opposition to change of any kind. And there are some people, and Philip's not one of them, who are very conservative and they don't want anything changed. And they point to the fact that good things are done by judges sitting up on the bench. The judges wrote the decision in Mabo by 6-1 in the High Court. That was before I was appointed to the court, but that was a decision not of our Parliament, but of the judges, holding that the old law of not recognising the claim of First Nations people to their traditional lands was no longer the law of Australia. That was fixed up by the judges, but often the judges can't deal with it because there's an Act of Parliament or a provision in the Constitution that stands in the way, and we don't have a Bill of Rights in our Constitution, but we have the way of reasoning that was adopted by the judges in Mabo. And I hope I live long enough to see that reasoning applied in many other cases, not just land rights.
Philip, what do you think?
Well, there are parliamentary committees and there are people who have a genuine interest in relation to matters that impact upon our First Nations people. And it's a question of identifying those members and to assist them with the information that's going to help them in taking these matters forward. When I was sitting on the Parliamentary Committee dealing with Indigenous affairs and I was its chair, I was invited to chair it by a fellow called Billy Wentworth.
Oh, yes. Very fine man. No conservative on those
well,
issues.
Wentworth was a very interesting man on these matters. He used to go in his four-wheel drive vehicle visiting Indigenous communities all over Australia. And he would leave his Northern Beaches electorate and disappear for the whole of the parliamentary non-sitting periods dealing with our First Nations people. And I had two other Labor former ministers for Indigenous Affairs on the committee, and we were very focused on how we were going to deal with particular questions. But when you look at schooling, when you look at health, issues relating to health, when you look at the alcohol problems, these were real issues impacting upon First Nations peoples, and we needed to have a concerted view that we were going to deal with them. I don't know that I hear those matters discussed with the same sense of urgency these days. I might have to do a little more research, but I don't see it published in the way in which it was when people like Billy Wentworth were there.
You need catalysts and you need stirrers and troublemakers who will speak up.
Never troublemakers, just stirrers.
Never troublemakers for you, but in my opinion, a few troublemakers scattered around the parliament, one there, one there, one there.
Can make a difference.
Speaking up. And,
You know, Michael, you've alluded to this, but what would meaningful change actually require?
well, it would require money, moolah. It has to be found to find. This is what many of the proposals in the report involved so-called shifting the money that we're spending in the criminal justice system into assisting and supporting Aboriginals and Aboriginal communities, First Nations people. And this funding, changing the model so that we don't just lock people up, but we spend money on assisting them. And cases are referred to in this report of First Nations people who, because they've had no proper education opportunities, keep getting into trouble. And the law has to do something about that, but the solution has been all too often to use imprisonment, and that should be a last resort, and we should develop means of assisting. First of all, assisting the First Nations people who are in the system, in the criminal justice system, so that they understand what is happening to them and they can speak from their own background and their culture about what their response is and what they think should be done in their case. In New Zealand they do this much more than we do. They've got the Maori people and they are more numerous, and let's be frank, they have been more warlike, the Maori, and I think because of that they tend to get more airtime than our First Nations people. Gordon can't change this, I can't change it, but Philip and his successors can change it.
You know, we pour a lot of money into Aboriginal communities already, and for a lot of them are human disaster areas. I mean, there's no male mentorship, there's nothing for the kids to do, there's no real work. Everybody looks to Aboriginal art in these communities as if it's an employment strategy or some way out of this abyss that we find ourselves in. I have Aboriginal grandchildren living in communities that are, awash with drugs and where alcoholism is rife, and they don't seem to be getting anywhere. In fact, it seems to be getting worse and worse as people get more and more divorced from the cultural wellspring that they came from, if you know what I mean. I mean, now Aboriginal people are living in a sedentary life that formerly were nomadic or moving around their country. They live in these townships which everybody speaks of as if they're virtuous, but actually there's nothing particularly virtuous about any of these communities. As I say, they're disaster areas, and no matter how much money the government puts in, it doesn't get any better.
Well, maybe that's because there's not enough consultation with people who can speak with authority and with the ear and voice of the Indigenous people.
Well, this was the idea behind the voice, wasn't it?
Well, it was, but to be frank, I think the reason that failed was because it was too vague, a voice. And that it was too vague because the First Nations people speak in poetry, and the rest of us in Australia speak in prose, and it was very difficult to get them speaking to each other.
But it didn't help that we didn't have bipartisan support.
Well, let me just deal with it in a way that I came to it. The first two parts I thought were totally unobjectionable. The issue with the third part was the question when you gave Indigenous people access to every public servant throughout the country, which you didn't give to others in terms of accessibility, was never going to work. And people saw that, and I think that prompted them to vote against. And it was put on the basis that you had to agree to all three.
So now where are we now, though? Okay, we've been through that, and what's happened has been that many of the most prominent advocates for the voice have gone quiet, and they're pretty traumatised by the experience.
Licking their wounds, I'd say.
And waiting to come out again. Well, we're waiting for them to come out again. What approach do they have to take next time?
Well, I think they have to look at the issues that led to its defeat, and they were specific. And I think the broad question of recognising Indigenous people as the First Nations people of Australia, there is, I think, an agreed position amongst the Australian community that is in fact appropriate. Giving them the right to go and talk to their members of Parliament in public affairs, in my view, they've got an absolute entitlement to that. They weren't expressed in the Constitution. It was when you took it down to the bottom and said you can get to anybody at any level in ways which others can't, was never going to work. And that was, I think, the problem.
Especially now that we're such a country of immigrants, and from so many different backgrounds, they would be thinking, well, if them, why not us?
But I think that's a strength, that we can bring people together of different races, different religions, different cultures. And what troubles me is when you've got people around who are of the view that we should be saying yes to some and not to others. I think there are certain fundamentals about the way in which we run the immigration program, and being non-discriminatory in terms of race, religion, culture, are fundamental.
I agree with Philip that our multicultural ideal and often practice is a strength of Australia. If we can't develop in our country a multicultural society where all of these newcomers and the English who established the institutions of Australia can't get together with the First Nations people, then our world is in a pretty sorry way. We can give an example to the world.
Well, that's our hope. We all hope that we would be an example.
Well, we've got to work harder, and we've got to spend more money in securing better education, better housing, better health care, All of these
Is
things,
that the answer to the high levels of incarceration, do you think?
I think it's one of the answers, but you got to start somewhere. Every great journey starts with a single day and a single footstep. And I think there are many footsteps which we have to take. But meantime, we have wonderful art from Gordon Syron, and much of it is here in your exhibition. I congratulate you for having this exhibition. My favourite, I think this is too close to the bone, let's put it that way, but my favourite is the one of the sailing ships coming into Sydney Harbour. The way Gordon has portrayed the sailing ships, these people from the other side of the world who took a big risk coming on the oceans of the earth, and they brought many good things. And what we've got to do is make sure that the good is spread a bit better. It's like peanut butter. You've got to spread it evenly and equally for all.
And I think Gordon's story is a very fine story to be told. And his work is so incredible because it puts into people's minds something of the challenges that we are facing. And when I look at this piece of work behind us, it does tell you a story. And the justice system, which Michael has been talking about, needs to be thinking about the way in which it is able to meet their needs and assist them. And just locking them away is not the way to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Adrian, to be surrounded by these wonderful portraits.
It's been a great pleasure to have you here in the gallery and an honour. And thank you, Gordon, for what has been a remarkable 60-year career in art. You've been like the bellwether, the conscience that's constantly prodding away at the subconscious and the injustice within our society, and asking the challenging questions, asking, can it be redressed? How do we redress these problems? How do we go forward in honour of our Aboriginal inhabitants and forebears? It's all very well to give welcomes to country, and that is an important reminder that we're on Aboriginal land. But our Aboriginal brothers and sisters are still in a pretty bad position these days, and we're all hoping for a better and brighter future for them.
Here. This is for you.
Money.
Money! Money, money, money.
Makes a difference.
Right.